Hey guys, it's Z on Saturday for Out of This Binary, and today we're talking about mental illness. So, there are two situations I want to talk about in regards to mental illness. So I have some... Basically, I want to give a little bit of advice for people who cannot at the moment find a therapist or do not have a therapist, and for people who either do have a therapist or will have a therapist pretty soon. So, I just like this to preface this with by saying that, you know, therapy might not be for everybody, but it helps a lot of people, and if you are struggling with mental illness and you need help, a good therapist is the person who can help you the most. Of course, it's hard to find a good therapist, especially if you're part of marginalized groups, because therapists may hold bias against you for whatever reason, including being non-binary. I'm going to address that when I talk about people who do have therapists later on. But first, I want to talk about people who, for whatever reason, if you don't have a therapist and you're struggling with mental illness and you need help. It's important when you have a mental illness to have a support system made up of possibly family, friends, teachers, mentors, doctors, whatever, people who can help you when you're not in a good place. If you don't have a support system, try and build one up. And it can, you know, you don't have to like go out and meet a bunch of new people. It might be as simple as getting a little bit closer to someone you wouldn't have considered part of your support system before, but if you get a little bit closer to them, you find that they're trustworthy and that they care about you and that they are a possible part of your support system. Another thing you can do to help yourself is to express your feelings in some way, regularly. So this can be just talking to somebody, it can be writing out your thoughts, it could be some form of self-expression through art, or maybe like if you are feeling certain emotions, you can let it out. Like, for example, if you're feeling angry, you can let it out through safe, controlled exercise. I don't want you to hurt yourself. And if, you know, yeah, basically just expressing your emotions is very healthy, and it lets you move on from them to other thoughts. Also, finding a community of people who also have experience with mental illness, particularly your mental illness, can really be helpful, and that can be part of your support system too, and it can be really helpful. But you need to watch out, because sometimes people can trigger each other, and so to avoid that, you need to make sure that it's a community that cares about other people, and therefore everybody will be striving to avoid upsetting other people by putting trigger warnings or asking before, like checking in with people to see how they're feeling during a conversation, or yeah, stuff like that. These are all things that really do help if you're struggling with a mental illness, but there are also very individual things which will help you, but it can be different for lots of people. Like, for some people, you know, exercise might be a good way to, like, take care of their body and to let out stress or anger, but for someone else, exercise might not help at all, or it might actually be harmful to them. For example, if you have an eating disorder and you have, like, problems with obsessive exercise, or exercise as a purging behavior, you have to figure out what works for you. Because if you don't have a therapist or some other doctor who knows about your mental illness and is qualified to treat it, then you are the next expert on what works for you and your mental illness. And recording your thoughts and experiences also helps in that you can figure out what does and what does not work to help treat your mental illness. Now, moving on to people who do have access to therapy. I figured, since this channel is about non-binary people, I would discuss the intersection between our identity and finding a good therapist, which is finding a therapist that accepts you and your identity. You could, you know, be in the closet around your therapist, and you could still get, you know, good help from your therapist, but to get the best possible help, you would need a situation where you have an accepting, understanding therapist who you can be comfortable around talking about your identity. Now, if you are looking for a therapist or looking to change for a new therapist, then you can do yourself a favor by looking for any therapists who specify in LGBT or just gender. And these therapists are the ones who have a high likelihood of accepting you. If you have to justify your choice in therapist to parents or someone else, and you don't want to be out to your parents, you can use a different quality of therapist to justify it. Like, you can say, oh, you know, I was like, someone from school recommended this therapist, or if they specialize in something else that's part of your mental illness, you can say, oh, they specialize in this part of my mental illness or this mental illness, and that's why I want to go see them. And that way, you know, increases your chances of being able to go to that therapist without telling your parents or whoever else that you're non-binary and that's why you want this therapist. Now, if you already have a therapist and you haven't come out to them yet, I can give you some tips on how to come out to them. Now, it may have to do, like, with what sort of relationship you have with your therapist. If you're very open and relaxed around your therapist, it might not matter so much exactly how you come out to them. But if it's just in the beginning of therapy, your relationship might be more awkward or formal. And in this case, it's good to plan ahead exactly how you're going to come out. You may want to write a letter or just write down on a piece of paper exactly what you want to say and then bring it to therapy and read it out loud to your therapist. your therapist has probably heard of transgender people before. You may want to start with that, because even if they have heard of transgender people, that doesn't mean that they've heard of non-binary people. It doesn't even mean they truly understand what transgender means. They might just have some idea in their head that's totally wrong, like most people. Unfortunately, you would think that therapists would be trained to have knowledge which would be important to some of their clients, but unfortunately, this is not always the case. So, you may want to start out by saying, do you know what transgender means? And, or do you know what non-binary means? And they might say, if they say yes, you can probably ask them, what does it mean? Because you want to figure out what they think it means, because they may be wrong. And if they're wrong, you can correct them. You can say, no, it actually means this. And the reason why I know is because I am non-binary or trans or whatever you want to come out to them as. And they might ask you a lot of questions, and it's good to be braced for a lot of questions. So in their mind, they are concerned for your well-being, but that might not actually be the case. They might actually be prejudiced, and if it comes out like that, you may want to find a different therapist. It's possible also that they're not prejudiced, but they're ignorant, and they might ask some questions which are confusing or hurtful, but it's good to remain calm if you can and try to explain to them why what they said is wrong. And since there's sort of like a power imbalance, because they're your therapist, so like they're supposed to know more than you, they might not accept the information just from you. So after you tell them like how it really is, then you might want to say, you can look this up, or you can go to this website, or you can, you know, ask some other person and they will tell you the same thing. You could suggest that your therapist, if your therapist isn't someone who specializes in gender or LGBT stuff, to call another therapist that they know professionally and ask them for advice, not specifically about your case, but about what transgender means or how to deal with a transgender or non-binary patient. It might take a few sessions for your therapist to really get it. I've had an experience where I came out to my family therapist, and she didn't understand at all what I was trying to communicate with her. And she asked me some really weird questions. Like, she asked me about my romantic attraction and, you know, what my relationships were like, and she said that she thought that I would have trouble with my partner's gender, so I may never be able to have a romantic relationship because I'm non-binary. That doesn't really make any sense. Unfortunately, it's a response that I've gotten multiple times. But after I tried to explain to her, and after a couple of sessions during which we talked about other things, she said that she looked it up and she realizes that she misunderstood it, and after that she was accepting. So it might pay off to be patient with your therapist. Okay, so I'm going to include a bunch of links about mental health, including a trans-specific crisis hotline, and some lists to some ways you can find a gender therapist near you, or a LGBT friendly therapist near you. I'm going to put those links in the description box. If I suggest that you go check out everybody else's videos, and I'd like to say, if you're ever in some sort of crisis, you can message me on my Tumblr or Twitter, and you know, if I'm there, I will be happy to talk to you, because I do care about our followers and I want you guys to be okay and feel out okay reaching out to us. I will include those links also in the description box. Okay, may your mental health be as good as possible, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Do you like my Powerpuff Girls background? I think it's pretty cute. Anyway.